The chamber seemed to hold its breath. Justice Clarence Thomas leaned forward, eyes narrowed, voice sharp, dripping with condescension as he launched into a pointed question meant to unsettle, to corner. Every syllable was calculated, each word a test, a challenge, an attempt to diminish the woman standing before him. The cameras swiveled, capturing every micro-expression, every shift in the audience's posture. The air itself seemed charged, electric, waiting for a spark. Across from him, Jasmine Crockett remained motionless, her calm unshaken. Her eyes, steady and unwavering, met Thomas's with the quiet intensity that drew the room into her orbit. Silence became her weapon. The bustling murmurs, the scratching of pens, the soft rustle of papers all faded beneath the weight of her presence. She didn't flinch. She didn't falter. She simply waited, letting the words hang in the air, heavy with intent. Narrator's voice slices through the tension. What happens when a justice tries to belittle brilliance? When authority meets unshakable poise? When arrogance confronts intelligence that refuses to bow? The question lingers, echoing across the chamber like a drumbeat in slow motion. Thomas's lips tighten, his confidence momentarily flickering. He's used to commanding attention, to having his challenges met with deference. But here, faced with Crockett, something shifts. The room feels the pause, the pregnant silence that precedes revelation. Every eye is glued to her, every mind anticipating the inevitable counter. The one line that could stop Thomas cold. And then, the hook settles in, the unspoken promise that this isn't just a courtroom exchange. This is a collision of will and intellect, a battle where composure wields more power than volume, and where one perfectly chosen phrase could echo far beyond the walls of the chamber. Cliffhanger, but how did it get here? And why was everyone already bracing for a moment they'd never forget? The air tightens, the cameras linger, and the nation, unknowingly, leans in, waiting for the first tremor of the storm about to break. The courtroom was a theater of anticipation. Every seat filled, every camera lens focused, every microphone primed to catch the next word. Outside, across the nation, Americans tuned in, some in quiet homes, others in bustling offices, all collectively holding their breath. The stakes were palpable. This wasn't merely a legal exchange, it was a cultural battlefield. A black woman, steady and resolute, stood facing one of the most entrenched pillars of conservative authority in the country. Dignity confronted intimidation. Quiet strength met centuries of institutional power. Clarence Thomas, renowned for his measured silence and piercing gaze, had transformed his authority into aggression. The courtroom sensed it immediately. His questions were no longer the calm probes of a seasoned justice. They were sharp, deliberate, designed to unsettle. Every word was a calculated challenge, a test not just of Crockett's knowledge, but of her composure, her resolve, and her very right to occupy the space. The weight of history hung in the air, decades of systemic bias, unspoken expectations, and the subtle pressure of being watched by millions who have long been told to remain unseen. Yet, Crockett's presence was magnetic in its contrast. She moved with quiet deliberation, every gesture minimal, every breath controlled. While Thomas wielded volume and authority, she embodied poise and preparation. Her calm wasn't passive, it was a weapon, honed by years of navigating spaces that doubted her, underestimated her, and attempted to silence her. Every setback in her life, every critique she had endured, had been training for this exact moment. The room could feel it. A storm was approaching. But it was Crockett who would determine its direction. The tension was mirrored in every corner of the chamber. Spectators shifted in their seats. Journalists fumbled for notes. And the cameras lingered longer on Crockett's serene expression. The nation watched in real time, social media threads igniting with speculation. Would she falter? Could she turn the tables on a justice whose silence had often been mistaken for omnipotence? The narrative was unfolding before a live, captive audience, that spanned generations, ideologies, and continents. And then, a collective sense of anticipation crystallized. This wasn't just another exchange of words. It was a defining moment, one that would reverberate far beyond the marbled walls of the courtroom. What came next wouldn't just stun the quartet, would electrify millions, the narrator intoned. The phrase lingered like a warning, a promise, a prelude. Every viewer, whether insider or outsider, knew that they were about to witness something historic. The room was charged with the electricity of impending revelation, and the nation waited, eyes wide, hearts racing, for the moment when composure would clash with authority, and brilliance would refuse to be silenced. Clarence Thomas's name evokes reverence, controversy, and unease in equal measure. From his early years navigating the intricate corridors of American law to his ascent onto the Supreme Court, his trajectory has been anything but ordinary. Many remember the young Thomas, ambitious and determined, quietly absorbing lessons in law, procedure, and strategy. He learned to wield silence like a weapon, letting his reputation speak before he ever raised a voice. That silence became his armor, a shield that protected him from scrutiny, criticism, and the chaos of public opinion. Those who underestimated him often discovered too late that his quietude masked an unyielding force as a justice. Thomas cultivated an image of calm authority. His words were measured, his expressions controlled, his judgments meticulous. But beneath that veneer lay contradictions that few dared to explore openly. Publicly, he upheld the weight of institutional power, presenting himself as a guardian of law and tradition. Privately, whispers of ethical debates and questions about his alliances swirled, hinting at tensions between principle and practice. Critics accused him of wielding influence selectively, allowing privilege and connections to tip the scales in subtle, almost invisible ways. These contradictions painted him as a figure both respected and feared, revered and resented, a complex antagonist in the theater of American politics. Thomas's reputation as a formidable opponent grew in tandem with his ability to intimidate without raising his voice. Colleagues, clerks, and even fellow justices noted his uncanny ability to unsettle others with a single question or a well-timed pause. In meetings, his silence was deafening. In hearings, his probing eyes carried the weight of decades of accumulated authority. He thrived on the institutional hierarchy, drawing strength from centuries of precedent and centuries of power. Challengers, especially those outside his traditional circles, were often dismissed before they could make their case. To many, he was untouchable, a monolith of legal and cultural authority. Yet, for all his calculated composure, Thomas was not without vulnerability. His reliance on institutional weight and the intimidation of silence created an Achilles heel: overconfidence. The more he assumed others would bow to his presence, the more rigid and predictable he became. History had shown that even the most disciplined figures could falter when confronted with brilliance that refused to be intimidated, when confronted with intellect that met force with reason rather than fear. Every calculated pause, every sharp question, every attempt to corner an opponent carried the risk that the armor of authority could fracture under pressure. And so, as Thomas leaned into his courtroom theatrics, unleashing questions and insinuations meant to corner Jasmine Crockett, the scene was set. This was no ordinary exchange. This was a collision between entrenched authority and a poised challenger whose preparation and insight rivaled the power of the institution itself. Thomas had navigated countless confrontations, weathered storms of public scrutiny, and silenced critics with decades of experience. But Crockett was not a standard opponent. She was a force shaped by struggle, intelligence, and unshakable composure. And she was about to test every assumption Thomas had about control, power, and influence, the contradictions of his career, the private criticisms, the ethical whispers formed a subtle tension that now threaded through the chamber. For all his history of dominance, the stage was set for an unprecedented challenge. His armor, polished and intimidating for so long, was about to meet a force it had never encountered. The audience could almost sense it, even before a word was spoken. The monolith might crack, silence might be broken, and the courtroom could witness an upheaval that history would remember. In that moment, the narrative was clear. Clarence Thomas, the towering figure of authority, would confront a brilliance he could not intimidate. But in this chamber, that armor was about to crack. Jasmine Crockett's story is one of quiet determination, relentless perseverance, and an unwavering commitment to justice. Born into a world where voices like hers were often sidelined, she learned early that change demanded more than words, demanded action. Law became her chosen path, not simply as a profession, but as a platform to champion those whose lives were too often ignored or dismissed. Each case she took, each client she represented, was an act of advocacy, a declaration that dignity and truth could not be silenced by privilege or power. From the courtroom to the streets of her community, Crockett's work embodied a relentless pursuit of equity, a refusal to allow the marginalized to be forgotten. Her journey through law school was marked by both rigor and resolve. While some peers approached the field as a stepping stone, she saw it as a tool and means to level a playing field long tilted against the disenfranchised. Late nights studying case law were more than academic exercises. They were preparation for real-life confrontations with inequality. Her professors quickly recognized her sharp intellect and her uncanny ability to anticipate arguments before they were made. But more importantly, she approached every challenge with empathy, seeing the human impact behind every statute, every precedent, every clause. Crockett's education was not just intellectual, it was deeply moral, shaped by a desire to transform knowledge into action. Beyond the classroom, Crockett immersed herself in her community. She became a voice for those who had been historically silenced: immigrants navigating complex legal systems, families struggling against systemic neglect, and individuals whose circumstances often rendered them invisible. Her advocacy was not performative. It was deeply personal. Each victory, no matter how small, reinforced her understanding that courage and intellect must intersect with compassion. In these formative years, she honed a skill crucial for public life: the ability to confront injustice without letting anger dictate her response, to act decisively while maintaining her integrity. This commitment extended into her early career, where she consistently took on cases that others deemed too difficult or unprofitable. She fought for workers facing exploitation, for tenants battling unjust evictions, for families seeking protection against bureaucratic indifference. In each instance, her approach was meticulous, her arguments precise, her demeanor calm yet commanding. Crockett learned that true power did not lie in volume or intimidation, but in preparation, poise, and the ability to expose truth with clarity. Every courtroom became a training ground, every challenge a lesson in resilience. Her identity and values also shaped her unique perspective. As a woman of color, navigating legal and political arenas often dominated by entrenched power, she became acutely aware of how systemic structures could both intimidate and overlook. Rather than allowing this to discourage her, Crockett transformed it into fuel and understanding that her very presence challenged assumptions, that her success could inspire countless others to pursue justice fearlessly. She internalized a powerful truth early on: representation is not symbolic, it is transformative. Each step she took was not just for herself, but for the communities she represented and the generations that would follow. By the time Crockett reached the national stage, she had cultivated a rare combination: intellect tempered by empathy, strategic foresight paired with moral clarity, and composure forged through relentless challenge. Every moment of struggle had sharpened her instincts, honed her rhetorical precision, and fortified her confidence. She had learned to read opponents, to anticipate attacks, and to counter with reasoning that demanded attention without resorting to aggression. Each chapter of her life, each obstacle overcome, had been preparing her for moments that would test not just her skill, but her character. And so, as she stepped into the courtroom facing Clarence Thomas, she did so not as a novice, but as a force shaped by decades of experience, courage, and principled advocacy. Her history was not just a resume, it was a testament to the power of preparation, the strength of conviction, and the enduring impact of dignity under pressure. The room could sense it. Here was a woman who had faced silence, prejudice, and intimidation before, and emerged unshaken each time. Every chapter of her fight had been preparing her for this very showdown. In that moment, she carried the weight of her journey, the hopes of the communities she served, and the clarity that truth, reason, and unwavering composure could confront even the most imposing of adversaries. The stage was set, the stakes immeasurable, and Jasmine Crockett was ready. Clarence Thomas leaned forward, his questions slicing through the hushed courtroom like sharpened blades. Each inquiry carried not just legal weight, but an undercurrent of condescension, a deliberate attempt to unsettle Jasmine Crockett. The words were pointed, the tone sharpened with insinuation. Yet Crockett remained statuesque, her calm a stark contrast to the intensity radiating from the bench. The cameras captured every flicker of expression, every subtle shift in posture, and the nation watched, collectively, holding its breath. The chamber seemed suspended in tension, quiet storm brewing between authority and resolve. Thomas's approach was methodically pressed, repeated, and punctuated each line with a subtle sneer, attempting to exploit hesitation or uncertainty. His questions touched on credentials, past decisions, and interpretations of law, all crafted to corner and provoke. Yet, with every calculated push, Crockett's poise only deepened. She absorbed the force of his interrogation without flinching, each pause measured, each response carefully considered. Her silence was not empty. It was a deliberate counterbalance, a demonstration that composure can command far more attention than aggression. The audience shifted uneasily in their seats. Some leaned forward, sensing the imminent collision, while others exchanged furtive glances, unsure how this confrontation would unfold. Whispers traveled through the chamber, the tension almost tangible, a living testament to the high stakes of this encounter. Outside, social media began to buzz, live streams capturing snippets of the exchange, viewers dissecting every syllable, every glance. The contrast was electrifying. Power attempting to dominate versus the serene authority of someone who had weathered every storm life had presented. Every escalation from Thomas only highlighted Crockett's extraordinary discipline. He raised his voice, emphasized each word with pointed inflection, yet she remained unmoved, listening intently, letting the weight of silence speak volumes. It was as if the room itself leaned toward her, sensing that this was no ordinary rebuttal. Her restraint became a mirror, reflecting the aggression back, exposing its fragility. The courtroom, filled with centuries of tradition and hierarchy, seemed to pause, waiting the inevitable moment of reckoning. The narrator's voice captures the essence of the confrontation. Power tried to tower over dignity, but dignity doesn't flinch. It was more than an exchange of legal arguments. It was a cinematic tableau of contrast, a clash between established authority and principled courage. Every question Thomas posed was a test, every insinuation a challenge. Yet, Crockett's quiet strength transformed each potential attack into an opportunity to assert control through intellect and integrity. As the back and forth intensified, it became clear that this was not just a verbal sparring match. Thomas's attempts to dominate were faltering under the weight of Crockett's unwavering confidence. Each pause, each carefully measured expression, carried the momentum building toward a moment the courtroom would never forget. The stage was set, the tension palpable in every observer, from the justices to the press to millions watching live, sensed that something monumental was about to unfold. Because Crockett wasn't just enduring. She was about to flip the script. The courtroom held its breath. Clarence Thomas, accustomed to commanding silence with mere presence, leaned forward, anticipation etched across his face. Jasmine Crockett, until now a study in uncheckable.com, finally spoke. Her voice was measured, deliberate, yet every syllable cut sharper than any raised tone. The chamber, frozen in tension, seemed to lean in closer, drawn to the gravity of what was unfolding. It was as if time slowed. Every eye, every camera, every microphone captured the precision of her delivery. Crockett began with a careful dismantling of Thomas's line of questioning. She addressed each insinuation, each pointed remark, with clarity and authority, tracing back to facts, precedent, and the unassailable logic that underpinned her career. Not once did she raise her voice, yet the weight of her words reverberated louder than any yell could. Every pause was intentional, a masterclass in suspenseful, allowing the chamber to digest the implications, letting the subtext speak as loudly as the spoken word. Observers shifted in their seats, leaning forward, aware that they were witnessing more than a rebuttal. They were witnessing the command of dignity itself. Thomas's composure, often unshakable, began to falter. The faint tightening of his jaw, the subtle narrowing of his eyes, betrayed a flicker of unease. Each carefully framed response from Crockett chipped away at the authority he wielded through years of reputation and institutional weight. The courtroom, filled with tradition and hierarchy, began to feel the cracks in the armor of dominance. Her methodical delivery turned the interrogator's power into a spectacle, highlighting the contrast between aggression and deliberate mastery. The suspense built steadily. Pauses became punctuation, letting her points linger in the air, leaving no room for misinterpretation. The audience, both present and watching through media feeds, absorbed the slow-motion unraveling of a carefully constructed attempt at intimidation. Whispers traveled, eyes met across aisles. Social media feeds erupted with anticipation, and analysis millions collectively, sensing that this exchange was about to crystallize into something unforgettable. Then came the moment that would echo beyond the chamber. With a final, precise turn of phrase, Crockett delivered the line that stopped Thomas cold. It was not just clever, it was devastatingly accurate, exposing the gaps in his logic, the overreach in his authority, and the audacity of attempting to diminish brilliance with condescension. The words landed like a hammer on steel, resonating with the principles of justice, intellect, and unshakable dignity. Cameras caught the instant Thomas froze, his expression betraying surprise, respect, and a flicker of vulnerability. The room fell utterly silent. The only sound, the echo of her words reverberating against marble walls. The mic drop moment was total. Crockett did not gesture, did not celebrate. She did not need to. The space around her seemed to bend to the gravity of her argument, the chamber itself acknowledging the shift. Observers, journalists, clerks, lawyers, and justices alike absorbed the quiet power radiating from a woman who had mastered the art of precision and patience. The clash had ended, but the impact was only beginning. Social media, live stream viewers, and political analysts instantly recognized the gravity, crafting hashtags, clips, and commentary that would ripple across the nation. Every reaction amplified the moment. Thomas, long accustomed to being the final authority, could only watch as the narrative shifted. Crockett's.com authority had done what volume and aggression never could. It had reframed the debate, defined the terms, and claimed moral and intellectual high ground. The courtroom, steeped in centuries of decorum and protocol, had borne witness to a new paradigm, the quiet, unyielding power of integrity and intellect. And as her words reverberated, the real storm erupted, not in marble halls, but across the nation. Commentators dissected the exchange endlessly. Progressive voices hailed it as a defining moment in modern political theater, and social media amplified every second. Memes, clips, and analyses spread like wildfire, not mocking or diminishing, but celebrating the calculated mastery of composure. Crockett had not only defended herself, she had delivered a masterclass in turning attempted domination into a showcase of dignity. The echoes of that line persisted, replayed in feeds, newsrooms, and dinner table conversations. It became a reference point, a symbol of measured courage, overpowering inherited authority. Those who had doubted the power of calm intelligence now reconsidered. Those who had underestimated the impact of preparation and clarity found themselves witnesses to a quiet revolution. Every follower, every observer, every citizen watching felt the resonance. Here was a woman who turned attempted intimidation into a showcase of excellence. Even as the moment passed, the atmosphere remained electric. The room, though returning to procedural rhythms, could not erase the imprint of what had occurred. Crockett remained composed, a silent acknowledgement that true power does not need to assert itself through noise. It asserts itself through clarity, precision, and unwavering confidence. The clash had concluded, yet the message reverberated far beyond the chamber. Brilliance, when paired with dignity, cannot be silenced. In those tense minutes, history had been quietly but unmistakably recorded. And while Thomas processed the weight of her response, the nation collectively exhaled, recognizing a defining confrontation between arrogance and poise, noise and wisdom, intimidation and grace. Crockett had transformed a potential humiliation into a defining triumph, and the story would echo for years as a masterclass in leadership, intellect, and courage. The moment Crockett's words landed, the courtroom's silence shattered into a tidal wave of digital chaos. Phones clicked, cameras streamed, and social media exploded with reactions. Within minutes, hashtags like #CrockettMoment, #ClapbackQueen, and #FrozenCourt were trending nationwide. Clips of her measured, devastatingly precise response were shared, replayed, and dissected across platforms, each view amplifying the echo of her composure. Memes flooded feeds, some humorous, some reverent, but all recognizing the seismic shift she had created in a single line. Progressive commentators celebrated, framing her response as more than a personal triumph. It was a statement about dignity, intelligence, and the power of preparation. Political analysts debated the implications. A seasoned Supreme Court justice confronted by the calm authority of a congresswoman unafraid to challenge tradition, hierarchy, and intimidation. Public figures on all sides of the aisle were forced to acknowledge the contrast. Even moderate voices, often careful not to pick sides, praised her poise, admitting the undeniable strength in how she turned aggression into a showcase of competence. Tweets, posts, and status updates repeatedly noted one recurring theme. Crockett had done what few could: freeze the court, and in doing so, reshaped the narrative. Media headlines captured the moment with explosive language. Crockett freezes the court. One line. Total domination when dignity defeated intimidation. News segments replayed the exchange. Analysts paused to explain how her calm, methodical delivery had made every insult from Thomas seem hollow. Viral clips spread globally, with commentators drawing parallels to historical courtroom confrontations and legendary debates, framing Crockett's response as a modern exemplar of grace under pressure. Meanwhile, social media chatter wasn't just praise, it was participatory. Audiences across the country dissected her phrases, shared reaction gifs, and started threads celebrating her preparation, intellect, and courage. Progressive influencers and civic leaders amplified these moments, inviting followers to reflect on how preparation and composure could redefine power dynamics in politics. Educational forums, civic podcasts, and legal analysts dissected her strategy, treating the episode as a teaching moment for a generation seeking both representation and inspiration. The viral moment also sparked deeper conversations about representation, authority, and the intersection of identity and power. Crockett, a black woman with immigrant-friendly values, had confronted centuries of institutional dominance and emerged victorious not through volume, anger, or theatrics, but through mastery, dignity, and calm authority. The discussions went beyond politics. They touched on social dynamics, generational shifts, and the evolving expectations of leaders in positions of influence. Her response became a case study in how intelligence, courage, and moral clarity could disrupt entrenched systems without violating principles or decorum. Yet, even as hashtags trended and clips circulated endlessly, a sense of anticipation lingered in the air. Observers sensed that this wasn't merely a viral sensation, it was a signal. Conversations were shifting, expectations were changing, and the public imagination had been captured. Analysts speculated on the long-term impact, on how this one line could inspire new dialogues about leadership, accountability, and the power of composure. The nation watched not only the replay of a courtroom moment, but also the unfolding ripple effects that promised to challenge norms and inspire future leaders. And while Crockett remained composed, allowing her words to speak without embellishment, the undercurrent was unmistakable. A transformation was underway. Social media had amplified the immediate shock, but the real impact was subtler, more profound. Citizens, voters, and young leaders alike began to internalize the lesson. Measured brilliance can silence arrogance, and dignity can outshine intimidation. The courtroom might have returned to routine, but across the country, the conversation had changed, and the reverberations were just beginning. But beyond the memes, the viral fame, and the media frenzy, something deeper was stirring, something bigger than politics. As the echoes of the courtroom moment faded, it became clear that the clash between Crockett and Thomas was more than a debate. It was a symbol, a microcosm of a larger struggle. On one side, institutional weight, authority, and intimidation sought to define the narrative. On the other, courage, preparation, and dignity stood firm, unshaken, unwavering. The tension had been palpable, but the lesson was profound. True power is not measured by volume, title, or historical precedent. It is measured by conviction, clarity. Crockett's.com response demonstrated a fundamental truth about leadership. It is not forceful bluster or aggression that commands respect, but intelligence, integrity, and the quiet authority of preparation. Her measured delivery, each word deliberate and precise, proved that convicts rooted in knowledge, experience, and values can topple arrogance more decisively than any shouted insult. In that moment, she redefined what it means to own the stage, not through intimidation, but through poise, command, and unwavering self-belief. The symbolic power of the exchange resonated far beyond the walls of the courtroom. It became a blueprint for navigating spaces historically dominated by those unwilling to be questioned, showing that dignity and grace are not weaknesses, they are strategies of strength. For viewers across the nation, especially those from immigrant and marginalized communities, Crockett's response was validation. Representation matters, preparation matters, and courage under scrutiny is a form of quiet revolution. It was a reminder that no matter the history or power imbalance, its integrity can level the playing field and inspire collective empowerment. This confrontation also elevated universal values to the forefront. Justice, equality, and Americanness were no longer abstract concepts. They were enacted in real time, embodied in the confident posture and piercing clarity of a woman who refused to be belittled. Grace, under fire remaining composed in the face of arrogance, became a living lesson, showing that resistance need not be loud to be effective. That intelligence, combined with moral clarity, can rewrite expectations. And that courage is contagious when modeled at the highest level. The crescendo of the moment was unmistakable. Crockett did not just respond to Thomas, she transformed the encounter into a defining narrative of dignity prevailing over intimidation. Every viewer, every commentator, every social media post carried the underlying truth forward. The power of composure, the impact of preparation, and the force of conviction are timeless, replicable, and universally inspiring. It was a moment of education as much as spectacle, where lessons about character, leadership, and ethical courage were transmitted alongside viral clips and trending hashtags. This wasn't just Crockett versus Thomas. It was dignity rewriting history. That line, while simple, encapsulated the essence of the encounter. It affirmed that moments of confrontation, when met with poise and principle, can ripple outward, challenging societal assumptions, inspiring individuals, and reshaping collective consciousness. The courtroom had become a stage, and Crockett had turned it into a demonstration of how courage, intellect, and moral certainty can overcome even the most entrenched authority. As the nation reflected, one thing was undeniable. The story was not only about the clash itself, but about the enduring lesson it delivered. Leadership rooted in dignity, the courage to stand firm against intimidation, and the deliberate use of intellect over aggression are not just political tools, they are universal instruments for progress. In a world often defined by noise, bluster, and superficial displays of power, Crockett's response reminded everyone watching that true influence is quiet, precise, and unforgettable. Her moment became more than a viral sensation. It became a moral exemplar, a rallying point for those who believe in justice, equality, and the transformative potential of grace under pressure. It was a call to internalize strength, model integrity, and embrace the belief that dignity, above all, can change history. And so, the chamber fell silent. Clarence Thomas, one of the most powerful figures in the American judiciary, had been met not with anger or concession, but with calm, unshakable clarity. Jasmine Crockett's one-line clapback didn't just respond, it silenced, it commanded, it defined the moment. This wasn't just a courtroom exchange. It was a historic declaration that dignity, preparation, and moral courage can stand toe-to-toe with even the most entrenched authority. For viewers across the nation, the lesson was clear. Power is not an intimidation, but in poise. Intelligence and conviction can turn the tables on those who presume dominance. And while headlines will celebrate the viral clips, and social media will endlessly replay the freeze frame of a justice stunned, the real victory lies in what Crockett's example represents. Because in the end, dignity doesn't just win arguments, it defines legacies. This is your invitation to be part of that legacy. Subscribe to the channel, share this story with friends and family, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Join a movement that honors truth, celebrates courage, and amplifies voices that challenge the status quo. Every like, share, and subscription is a signal that integrity matters, that preparation and bravery are worth recognizing, and that you stand on the side of principle over bluster. As we close this chapter, remember, Crockett's moment is more than just a viral sensation. It's a spark in a rising wave of change. Across the country, in offices, classrooms, and communities, people are witnessing the impact of standing firm, speaking clearly, and choosing dignity over fear. The ripple has begun, and those who watch closely will see that this wave is unstoppable, fueled by courage, intelligence, and an unwavering commitment to justice. The stage is set, the call is clear, and the story is far from over.